Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast UX Design to Win in Business. My name is Nils, co-founder at Dingy. We're a UX design agency based in, Central European time zone. Many of us are in Germany, some are in South Africa, some are in Estonia. We're a remote first company. And we're here to talk to you about user experience as a design topic, but for everyone who's a business owner, a product manager, anyone who's basically not a designer. And we're trying to make the topic more accessible and to make it more tangible of where user experience design can in fact help you to win in business. Today, I'm here to talk to you about agile development methods and how to actually integrate UX design into your daily routines, into the development process of your products and services. And to do that, let's rewind a little bit on Agile. So as someone who's been a business owner for many years, you probably remember the years when terms like Agile development methods and design sprints and so on came into your life and made it from, tech startups and smaller companies and made it all the way medium-sized companies and enterprises. And what we all know about Agile is the emphasis on iterative development, on collaboration, and on flexibility. Those were always the selling points on Agile methodologies. And just to pedal back like a little bit more in my long career on the internet, with something that I will always keep at heart and will never forget, is that when I started to study computer science back in the days, our software architecture professor came into the room and started like software architecture 101, so to say, like the very first thing. And that was close to Cologne in Germany. And he started to talk about the highway toll system and how the German government spent millions on developing a software solution to incur tolls on trucks going down the German highways, and how this entire project was such a gigantic disaster. And he wanted to turn this story into the baseline of how to not do software architecture. In a nutshell, the whole problem was that all the steps and all the requirements and everything from the very first version to the entire system going live were jotted down into one gigantic document, like hundreds of pages probably, outlining every single step from the start to the finish for a project that took many years to develop. Now we know, and that was also his message back then, that software projects don't work out that way. It's very nice on paper to be able to know every step up front in advance and to know the budget and to know when things will be finished. But I can't speak for many other countries, but I know in Germany that especially governmental projects that tend to be discussed in the media, of course. I'm sure there are other projects in the private sector that go the same way. But public projects like bridges, airports, train stations, they are all in the same realm of how project planning can go wrong. Like they cost more in the end, they take longer than originally planned. And all that sort of stuff is in the promise of agile development to be alleviated by it. That's kind of what we know. And those methods, I think, were very successful in restructuring how software development works. We all know that software development is very hard and that it's complicated and that there's always something unforeseen in the process. And so the way we also work at Dingy in our agency projects is that we kind of go all in. What I mean by that is from the very beginning, almost the entire team is on the project right away, all together at once. And though that feels like a lot, it usually is for the sake of reducing knowledge transfer in the end. So if we take the classical model, I think, and many companies still work that way, then the first step is the collection of business requirements. Those business requirements get translated into a wireframe, like a black and white drawing of how the software is going to look. Then this wireframe with all of the requirements fulfilled goes into the design process. UI designers make like a very pretty design out of it in static images. And then this design file is handed over to the development team. The development team works as long as needed. And then the feature or the software is released. The problem with this is, as you probably also know, that feedback loops are kind of hard. So everyone works in a silo, and the team waiting for the result of the first team, they don't know anything. Like they are just waiting for the thing to be finished. Then they can access the design or the wireframes or the requirements and kind of have to deal with what they get presented. Like it's kind of too late at this stage for them to say, look, it would be much easier if we implemented this in that way. For this to work, we would have to change the requirements just a little bit. Or something that I've been talking about before in the podcast is the fact that even if the development of the software, the feature works well, you release it to the public and your customers tell you, this is actually not what we expected. I can't use this. And so they churn from your product. Or, with customers, it's even worse because they usually don't tell you that they're not happy with something. They just stop using your service or your product. Like it's not like they're coming around to give you feedback. So all of this, be it as it may, in agile software development, in our case, the tactic is and has been now for many years, and I'm sure that it's also in parts roll out in your organization as well already, is that there's more overlap between the teams. So we break apart the silos of just business requirement, product managers, people, UI designers and developers, and maybe quality assurance or something. And we let those teams work together more fluently. And now to kind of cast the bridge over to user experience design. If you listen to episodes on this podcast before, then you already know that user experience is something that is not UI design. I'm always making the case of user experience design is much more like brand design. Like it's much more of an overarching topic than just the pretty alignment of UI elements. Because it's good that the UI works and provides a good user experience, but that this requirement can not only be solved by UI designers in static images. So as you also know, to close the gap between UI designers and developers, that takes a lot of effort because developers speak a different language than UI designers do. And so the drop off in knowledge between these two parties is always very big. And the same applies for user experience design in general, because developers, since they are transforming the statically designed images of a user interface into working software, there's so much that usually is not accounted for by the designers and that they have to kind of invent on the fly. So that is, how does the UI look when there's no data found? Like maybe what's the empty state of something? What happens if you click a button but the connection is dropped and the person currently has no internet? What happens if the software is viewed on an iPad in portrait mode or something like this? There's so many edge cases in the middle that software engineers have to solve for, that the best way to get the best product between UI designers and developers is to let them work together. And the same applies for user experience design in general. So when we run a project, we make sure that from the concept phase on, everybody is kind of in the same work stream. Not everybody every hour of the day all at once. But so maybe you already heard of the hot potato principle. This is kind of what we're doing. So if we start working on a feature, it's not like the designers work 1 week and then the developers work the next week. But we come up with the first wireframe of the first concept of a feature, and we have a kickoff session together. Then one of the UX designers goes ahead and makes a little wireframe to kind of record what we all worked on during the brainstorming session. And then we quickly turn this relatively rough wireframe into something like a clickable prototype. And then from there on, we already start to work with UX research. So we start to do usability testing on those wireframes, ask the UI designers to just get going and expect changes, because usually when you come out of usability testing, your users will tell you something different. I mean, it's not going to be 100% accurate because it's a wireframe. There's no images. There's not the final copy text in there. Like, a lot of things have to be left up for imagination by the participants of a usability test, but you can already spot like the important problems in a user journey that you dreamt up that way and then turns out to not be understood by your customers at all. So UI designers have to be flexible as well. And while there's usability testing and while there's UI design going on, even the development team already starts to work on the stuff that's going to be necessary to implement the UI. And that is because they can also see the wireframe. They can even ask the UI designers on the same team to show them a draft that they've been working on. And for a developer, it's very soothing to know what's coming at you, because developers are always the last in the chain, apart from quality assurance maybe. So there's business requirements, there's design, and then all at the way at the end, where probably many deadlines have already been pushed a little bit into the future. You as the development team now have the remainder of the time, which is probably very little. You have a very hard job to do, and after you, the feature is going live. So the pressure is very high. So even if the process seems a little bit convoluted, I promise you, developers will be very glad to be included in the thought process, in the concept, in the initial ponderings if this or that would be the right direction to go into. It is also useful not just to let them know what's going to happen, but also to get their input. Like, imagine you're working on the 10th feature of a software that you've been working on for 3 years now. The developers know this in and out, and they can tell you which is a good way to go about it from a technical perspective. And maybe the technical perspective will incur some kind of idea or good, like maybe there's a way you can make it the way you thought it up in your UI design, but it's going to take a lot of effort because it requires some foundational work that has not been done yet. But the developers say, look, we can totally aim for this and do that in the next sprint. And to get to what you want, to like an 80% version of that, we can provide like a little shortcut. We can, like, if you do it this and that way, you can get your 80%. And we do the 20% missing for like the real 5-star solution in the next sprint. But then we already know this now, and we can lay the groundwork for this. And so let's let that sink in. Like, let's let sink in that there's like a couple different roles and responsibilities going on in one Agile sprint at the moment. So we have the product manager who's keeping all of the business requirements in check. We have the UX designer who is working on the entire concept and is working with the product manager together to make sure that all of the copy text and imageries and styles and everything comes together in a way that they know from usability testing will be a good thing for your users. Then there's UI designers and developers. And so we usually work in 2-week sprints, and not all of these people work at the same time. Like, there is a little bit of a waterfall going from concept to development, of course, but all of those steps are much closer together. And whenever there's a doubt or whenever there's a new round of usability testing and we learn something new, then the requirements just might change a little bit. Now, I want to talk about a common misconception, in my opinion, but like a common question that I get from clients when I talk about how we tackle a project in this way. The number one thing I hear is that it sounds super great, Nils, amazing, but it sounds very convoluted, very chaotic, and it actually sounds like a lot of work. Like, it sounds like it's unpredictable and can take much more time than the structured approach that we kind of understand, like the classical Gantt chart. There's this task and that's a dependency for the next task and that's a dependency for the next task, and once we arrive at step 17 we're done, and that's awesome, and like every bar has like a defined length and so on. And I can totally understand that. Like, don't get me wrong, this is, of course, like this is, if you get this sort of chart, there's nothing to not understand, right? Like, the bars have a certain length. You can kind of just look into the future and know when your feature will be done. And how nice is that? The issue is that it's not that easy. And it's sadly just a promise that it work out that way. People go on vacation, people get sick, requirements change. You plan 3 features where the third one is based on feature number 1 and 2. But for feature number 1 and 2, you kind of went and iterated as long as you could and found out that it actually has to work a little bit differently. You maybe did that on usability testing, you got feedback through your public website, whatever. Like, you know that whatever you build has to change a little bit. Because feature 2 has changed a little bit, the basis for feature 3 is not what you expected anymore. And so your design document for features for half a year just got blown out of the water. And that is super frustrating. Of course, you always need a roadmap where you're going. Like, you can't just, throw an idea in this entangled ball of different roles and responsibilities of your designer and dev team, hope for the best and wait till they're done and then just get going. That's, of course, not the other side of the coin and can't be the solution. But it's very important to to keep a North Star of where you're going and then work on what's the next thing and really finish that feature. And with really finish that feature, I mean, talk to your customers, talk to other stakeholders outside of your organization. Maybe you have investors or anyone who's not in your immediate development team, and get as much feedback as you can. You will always learn something about what could be improved. And if it's the smallest thing, if you listen to podcasts of the episode, like the last one that we did, for example, on specifically usability testing, I can really just encourage you to listen to that episode because it untangles a lot about how usability testing actually makes the design process quicker and not longer. But in a nutshell, I just want to say is that it does sound convoluted and complicated. But in my experience, and I have now more than 10 years experience building websites and apps, and I worked at startups and I did freelance, and now I'm the co-founder of an agency. Whenever you work on something, and it really doesn't matter if it's an app or a landing page or any sort of digital product, it usually does not go exactly the way that you planned. And that is not because people are bad at planning. That is just how things happen when humans work together. And I think this is actually not something to be fearful about, but this is something to embrace, because the best solutions I've seen for individual features and problems, they came out of the collaboration of people from different backgrounds. The best solutions are not cooked up when you put like your 3 top UI designers in one room for a week and let them do their thing. The best solutions come when people work together, bring in their individual backgrounds, and discuss in a productive way how to solve a specific issue. I don't know if you ever heard of the Spaghetti Tower Challenge, but that is something that you can really look up on YouTube and have like a little fun about it. So it's the story of how it's a test for teams and how effectively they work together. And this is also, of course, not something that you can just apply to an organization, but the image, I always found it very powerful in speaking. So the test is, there's a group of 5 and every team gets like a specific amount of spaghettis, like raw spaghettis, of course, and just regular tape. And the challenge is, as a team in a specific time frame, to build the highest tower possible. And to cut a super long story short, this test has been done with the smartest people on the planet, like MIT grad students, software engineers, even I think Major League Football teams, and any background you can imagine, any team that has been proven to be the best working together team that you could imagine. This has been repeated many, many times. And opposed to all of the grown-ups, it's always also a test group to take, like a group of kindergartners. And the kindergartners, this would be a horrible story if it didn't turn out that way, I know, but the kindergartners always won. Of course, they always won because they don't care about hierarchy, about politics. They don't start the exercise by figuring out who's the leader of the process and who's this and who's that and who has that view on whatever. They barely talk while building the spaghetti tower. The only thing they do is, because everybody wants to build and everybody wants to help the project, like they gather around the table so close that they can touch left and right with their arms, and they just speak in bursts, like quick bursts. Like, give me this, give me that. Sometimes they don't even speak, like if you have children, you know this. They just grab stuff. And it feels super rude, of course, but they consistently, like throughout all the tests, beat the MIT students, the astronauts, the whoever, like all of those grown-up people. They always beat them. And again, I'm not advocating for complete chaos in your development team, but I'm advocating for taking all of these factors into account that will lead to a winning product. And since we are on UX design to help you win in business, one huge component that is usually overlooked is UX research and UX design in general. And that comes back to the fact that we, of course, inside our own organization, we have the vision where we want to go. But an assumption that is usually made is that also means that you know what's best for your customers and what people will actually want to use. And I've seen this idea debunked so many times over the last 3-4 years since we really started to work with the whole broad range of user experience research. I've seen that being debunked so many times now that at some point I questioned my integrity as a UI designer. Like, I thought, I have 10 years experience. How can I not know? How can I not have seen this one coming? But I can also tell you, and I also spoke about that one in the last episode with Nasipo, our UX researcher, I never came out of a usability testing session without having learned something new. Like, even when I was 100% sure that this feature would have been perfect, it never was. It never was. And whenever you also tell the UI designers and the developers and the business people, if you show them the video recordings where customers point to the things that they don't understand, then you just see like a light bulb raising above everybody's heads, because it's usually out of a corner or an area or a workflow that you didn't even anticipate. Like, maybe your feature is even sound, but the user journey leading up to it kind of already lost your user. So long story short, if you want to be better and more successful and quicker at developing new features in your software, in creating new landing pages for ad campaigns, in building any digital artifact at all, then I can only urge you to get the people together, like get them on the same sprint, break up the silos of the individual teams, go completely horizontal in the organization, and get those people to work together. It will feel like madness in the beginning, let's be frank. It will feel a little bit chaotic, but if you endure this letting go of control just for a little bit and trust in your people's skills and in their judgment, I promise you, you will be absolutely blown away by the results. And with this, I want to end this episode today. Dingy, we're in the month of usability testing research, and go and follow our blog. There's a lot of interesting stuff coming up. In the months leading up to the end of the year, we have also the topic of personas. We will talk about content management and structured content, and have so much good stuff going on that I can only invite you to follow the podcast, follow us on the blog. And if you have any questions or if you have suggestions for me to go better, please reach out on any of the channels. I'm always very grateful for feedback. With that, I want to thank you and see you on the next one. Bye.